Hello, Chevre. I hope everyone is gesund, stark und freilich, begashmis und beruchnis. I hope you're all healthy, strong, and happy physically and spiritually. Der Eibishter soll helfen, die alle Iden, was davon geholfen werden, was für ihnen sollen sein, sollen geholfen werden, take from Yad Mamish. Hashem should help that all those that need a salvation in any area of their lives should be helped immediately. This week's parsha is Parshas Eikev. Before we say the thought for the week, we'll begin with one of the POSUKim of the Rebbe's new kapitel. And that's POSUK Kuf Ches of kapitel Kuf Yutes. Somar mipach decho v'sori umimishpotecho yereisi. My skin broke out in goose flesh. In awe of you, I have done justice. And I was afraid of your judgments. So over here we see the concept of Yira Shamayim, fear of Hashem, to such a degree that it permeates your body totally. Even the physical flesh becomes affected by this awe of Hashem, which is a beautiful concept. And also about his fulfilling of the commandments out of fear. Now what does this mean in a practical sense? This is the concept of Kabbalas Oil Malchus Shamayim, accepting the yoke of the mitzvahs. Kabbalas Oil HaMitzvahs, accepting the yoke of the commandment of the mitzvahs. And this is a very central theme in this week's parsha, where in this week's parsha we have the second parsha of Shema. V'aya im shemoya tishmu el mitzvoisai. If you will listen to my commandments. Last week's parsha had the first parsha of Shema, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. This week's parsha has the second passage of Shema. Now, the Gemara explains that what's the difference between this parsha and the first one, is that this one is called Kabbalas Oil HaMitzvahs. The stress is on action, doing the commandments. And therefore, it's explained, one of the differences is that in the first parsha of Shema, it says first, Vishinantam levanecha, the studying of Torah, and then it says, Ukshartam lo yisal yadecha, performing the mitzvah of tefillin. But in the second passage of Shema, in this week's parsha, first it says, Ukshartam oisam lo yisal yedchem, first you should put on the tefillin. First it says the mitzvah of putting on the tefillin, and then it says, V'limadetem oisam. Then it speaks about teaching Torah to your children. In other words, it's the concept of Maise Godil, accepting the yoke of heaven, and the stress is on the action, the performance of mitzvahs. So here we come to another very interesting point. The POSUK says, V'hoyim shemoya tishmu. And as a matter of fact, the first words of the parsha is, V'hoye Eikev tishmiyun. If you will listen. But what does listen mean over here? And over here we're going to see another example of the beauty and profundity of Yiddishkeit, which is amazing. The word Shema, which means to hear and listen, also means to obey. So on one hand, we have the concept of understanding, which shows on intellect. And on the other hand, we have the concept of Kabbalah Seil, obedience. Whether you understand or whether you don't understand. And that's the beauty of the word. That Judaism contains and consists of both aspects. Yes, the beginning is Reishis HaAvodah V'Ikra V'Shorsha, is Kabbalas, Oil, Mitzvahs, to be willing to do whatever Hashem commands us. But it's not meant to stay only by that. We're also meant to reach a level of understanding. Where do we see this? That the word Shema is connected to both understanding and obeying. So we see, for example, another pasuk where it means understanding, where it speaks about the story of the Migdal Bovel, and the pasuk says, "V'novlo sham svosam ashalo yishmu ish svasra eyu." Hashem says that He's going to come down and confuse the language of the peoples, that lo yishmu ish svasra eyu, they won't understand each other. There's another pasuk on the other hand where it says, "Vayishma Avram l'kol Sarai." Avram heeded what his wife told him to do. And this is the same thing over here, obviously, when it says v'aya Eikev tishmiyun, it's talking about fulfilling Hashem's commandments. As Rashi says on the spot, what are we talking about? Those mitzvahs that are usually ignored and neglected by others, and people don't treat it properly, and you perform them, then you be rewarded. So, but what does it mean over here? V'aya Eikev tishmiyun? It means to obey. And the same thing over here. V'hayim shemoya tishmu. And the second parsha of Shema, in the same parsha, it means to obey. And here we see a very practical, relevant message which cannot be emphasized enough. And that is, you could say, also connected to a discussion we once had about nature versus nurture. Nurture and nature. They have to go together. That's what we're talking about when we say, hear, understand, but also obey, which can be also connected to the concept of creativity and discipline. Understanding, intellect, could be connected to a talent, to a faculty, but obey is more of an action, more of discipline, no matter what the circumstances are. So here we're saying, nature and nurture. Nature, you could be born with a high intellect. You could be born a very passionate person. But you have to have nurture, the discipline, which is connected to that. So let's talk about creativity and discipline. So there's a saying I once heard. There's two different ways you could say it. Creativity without discipline is like a car without brakes. Or creativity without discipline is like a blender without a top. It's a great thing. God gave you a gift. You have seichel. You have Shema, understanding. But if you don't have the discipline, together with your creativity, it's not going to end up in the right place. It's either going to be out of control, it won't be consistent, it won't be responsible, etc., etc. So this is how we see the beauty of Yiddishkeit. That we have Shema, one word, which has both translations, and it gives us a foundation for life. Now, this also could be connected to the beginning of the parsha. If you will have the discipline, and you're serving Hashem, which is the Kabbalah's oil, mitzvahs, so then, like Rashi says, you will keep all those commandments, even the ones that others neglect. Why? Because it's not, your service of Hashem is not based on your whims or your moods. Today like this, tomorrow might be different. But no, or this commandment I like, or that commandment I don't like. No, you'll do every single commandment. Why? Because you know this is God's will. So therefore, you have the Kabbalah sail to carry it through. And maybe you could say also that the word Eikev is oisius keva. Like the Mishnah says, Asay teiroscha keva. How do you meant to make your Torah permanent, fixed? That only comes through discipline. When a person has the right Kabbalah sail to Hashem, then regardless of the time, regardless of the place, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of the mitzvah will happen because you're trained yourself to perform the mitzvahs in a way of azoy unitandish. You've accepted the yoke of the mitzvahs to carry out whatever Hashem's will is. There's a tremendous story connected to a Torah of the Alter Rebbe, also taken from the words of the second parsha of Shema, that bring out how without the discipline, then the talent in the end will be limited. And the story goes like this. There was a chassid from the Alter Rebbe's times who was once learning in a bais medrash, and he was learning loud, but very quickly, like with haste. And he understood it, what he learned, but he learned quickly, like the people who learn Gemara, they go, weiter, weiter, every 2 minutes they're going weiter, further. So the Alter Rebbe was sitting next to that room where this person was learning Torah, and the Alter Rebbe passed by, and the Alter Rebbe told him that you learn with big enthusiasm, but too quickly. So I told the Alter Rebbe, this person says, I told the Alter Rebbe, ich bin am moyer betivi. I have this nature, I'm a bit impatient. So the Alter Rebbe says you have to change your nature. So I told the Alter Rebbe that I can't change my nature. The Alter Rebbe said a Yid has neshama koiches und kemeshana hateva zayin b'derech kabbalas oil. The Alter Rebbe said through kabbalas oil, with discipline, you could change your nature. That's the nurture here. The nurture is training. Through kabbalas oil, you could change your nature. Und as when the sich margel is the hergel masateva. When you change your habits, then the habit comes a second nature. Kabbalas oil, the Alter Rebbe said, is the foundation of Torah and Avodah. And then the Alter Rebbe continued, and he said, to have such an enjoyment in learning Torah is a gift from Hashem. And this is the meaning of the verse. It's another interpretation. ואבדתם מהרה מעל הארץ הטובה אשר Hashem נותן לכם. The literal translation is, the verse is talking about over here, that if we don't listen to Hashem, then there will be consequences, and one of the consequences is we'll be banished from Eretz Yisrael, we'll have to go into exile. But you could interpret the verse as follows. Eretz HaTova, what does it mean you will be banished from the good land? Could also mean Eretz HaTova Hashem Neis Lechem is der Rotzen und Cheshik in learning Torah. Euch der Rotzen und Cheshik in Avedas Hashem is Baruch. Eretz is Rotzen. So, what does it mean, Eretz HaTova? When a person was given a goodwill in learning and davening. He enjoys it. He's enthusiastic about it. And he was given that as a gift. So you have to realize, Dav Zayin, Va'avadatem Mehera. Lose your haste. Va'avadatem means lose, Mehera, Melosh Mehirus. Lose your haste. But Dav Men Ma'abed Zayin de Mehera. Man darf lernen Torah with Kabbalas oil. And he goes on to say that with these words, the Alter Rebbe changed my nature, and I was given the chush hamasinus, patience, being thorough, and the Alter Rebbe made me gliklach for my entire life. So here we see, in one story, this idea of nature and nurture going together. You have a wonderful nature. We all have tremendous gifts and talents. But we shouldn't let them go to waste. If we don't have discipline connected and associated with our creativity, we are really going to lose the creativity. Or it won't reach its full potential. And this is also the beauty of Yiddishkeit, is the Shema, the understanding, the wisdom goes together with the discipline. As the POSUK says, Reishis Chachma Yiras Hashem. The beginning of wisdom is the fear of Hashem. And also the Gemara says, Tachlis Chachma Tshuva Maisim Tovim. The ultimate of wisdom is to come to the deed. There's another interpretation of the POSUK, V'aya Eikev Tishmun. Will come to Eikev, when it will come to the end of Ikfus the Mashiach, Tishmin will anyways all do what Hashem wants. So do it now. The Frierdiker Rebbe once said, connected to another story, Men dreht sich und zum Sof trefft man sich. Is was darf man sich drehen? In the end, people try to evade, people get distracted, people run around, but in the end they arrive. So why do we have to run around in the first place? The Eibishter shall helfen. We should come to the Gula Mitzvah Shlema now. Posting from my home, Hashem Yisbarach, your man in Melbourne.